Welcome, LaQuinzia Nichols, also known as Q. I am so excited that you are here with us at the 2026 Women of Color Leaders Symposium. Thank you for your time. I look forward to getting to know you through this interview that I will have with you. This time we're going to share. And ladies, I ask you to just lean back, relax, and let yourself be graced and blessed by the wisdom of yet another woman of color leader, LaQuinzia Nichols. Thank you again, my sister, for being here. So, LaQuinzia is going to share with us today something that's really important. The conversation we'll have is about how avoiding conflicts is costing you business, money, and relationships. But before I begin asking her to share about that with us, I want to share a little bit with you about who she is. LaQuinzia Nichols is a conflict and communication strategist and transformational speaker who works with high achieving women who are brilliant at what they do, but exhausted by the conversations they avoid. She speaks to the women who is leading, serving, and over delivering, yet finds herself dealing with scope creep clients, underpaying contracts, and unspoken expectations that quietly begin to chip away at her confidence and capacity. Through her keynotes, labs, and live experiences, LaQuinzia invites women to see where they've been shrinking, smoothing things over, and carrying the emotional weight of everyone else's comfort at the expense of their own. She then equips them with a clear, practical framework to unmute their power, set unapologetic boundaries, and use courageous conversations as a tool to protect their time, money, and self respect, not as a last resort, but as a new way of leading. Wow, I know I can relate, and I am excited to learn from you, LaQuinzia. So I have some questions, yeah, and I look
Yes, and
forward to
I'm
our
so happy to be
conversation.
here with you.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Thank you, thank
Thank,
you.
thank you for having me, and thank you for bringing such talented women together to share and educate and pour into and receive from each other. I'm
Mhm.
very, very thankful to be a
Mhm.
part of such a
Mhm.
wonderful symposium.
Thank you, thank you. And to pour into each other. You know,
Mhm.
that was the vision. That is what's happening here. So again, audience, ladies, I just ask you to relax and take it in. Let
Mhm.
it be medicine. Yes. So, LaQuinzia, my first question, what changes when women tell the truth about their money, about their capacity, and about their calling? What changes?
Yeah, I think it's a great place to start, Santa, because when women can really start to tell the truth about their money, their capacity,
Mm,
their
mm,
calling, right? When they think about their business, but also their nervous system gets an
mm,
opportunity to
mm,
exhale,
mm,
right?
mm,
Oftentimes we are so caught in to what are the things that we don't want for people to know about us that it starts to make us tight and restrictive. And that doesn't lead
mhm,
us to
mhm,
allow us to be open and expansive to what could be
mhm,
coming.
mhm,
So when you think about whether you're a leader in, one of the best corporations, or you're a leader if your small business, your
mhm,
entrepreneurial goal, or even just the leader of your family, because that job is also just as important. You start to be able to build offers and opportunities that really reflect the value that you get to bring to unique situations. You no longer allow yourself to sit in self abandonment just to survive. You start
mhm,
pricing,
mhm,
packaging, and partnering
mhm,
in ways that actually match the value that you bring
mhm,
practically, and you talked about it a little bit in my intro, it really allows for you to think about those clients or those partners in your business who are constantly overstepping the boundaries,
yes.
taking a little bit more than what they're giving, right? When you find yourself saying, you're having the opportunity to say more aligned yeses and be honest about where you need to say no without the guilt, without
Mhm,
the big apologies and paragraphs. You're just in a place of being honest about where you need a raise or where you need a renegotiation in
Mhm,
what used to
mhm,
work for you, but what no longer works.
mhm.
Internally, it really leans itself to a woman who is starting to trust herself again. And I think when she can see the numbers, right, her calendar, her commitments reflect what's truly aligned with what she's working towards that big goal, then she's a woman who's really sitting in what she's called to do and not just managing the tasks that keep everyone else a bit more calm.
Absolutely. And not only that, but we owe it to ourselves, to our business, to our family to be in integrity, right? To
Absolutely.
be truly in integrity and to let people know what they can expect, right?
Absolutely. I think
Um,
for
yeah.
a lot of us, Santa, we weren't taught, right, in a
Mm,
very sort of practical way of how to navigate conflict. A lot
mhm,
of us
mhm,
either, you saw it based on where you may have grown up and based on those images, it may have been healthy or it may have been unhealthy.
mhm.
Or maybe you were just taught to not lean into conflict at all, right? To where that might have been seen as disrespectful, either in
That's
your
right.
home or your professional life. So
Mhm,
how do you now navigate that as a growing adult person, right? To
absolutely.
say, hey, there are moments where I'm going to have a disagreement with someone. How do I manage that without burning down the relationship? Because we all
Mhm,
know how much
mhm,
relationships matter.
mhm,
Or if
mhm.
it's a situation to where it's no longer healthy, it's not going to result in the type of outcome that you're looking for. How do you sunset that relationship in a way that allows for you to still be graceful, that it still allows for you to be empathetic, but also allows you to be very clear about what's no longer going to work going forward.
Absolutely. I think that the conversations become less personal and more about what's practical, what's useful,
Absolutely.
what is
Absolutely.
needed. It's not personal. And
It's not.
so the idea of burning a bridge means something personal happened, right?
There you go.
But
That's
this
an
is
emotional
not
response.
personal. This is about business. This is about
Hmm.
just what works and what's needed. I think that the other thing that for me is really key here in what you're saying, LaQuincia, is something about what worked then, younger you,
Hmm.
newer in the field, maybe was necessary. So there's also
Absolutely.
no shame, no guilt, no blame, but
Nope.
we get to reevaluate, right? We evaluate our business, we evaluate how we're doing, how things are going, evaluate how are you making decisions, right?
Right.
Because we need different things at different times. And so it's okay to let go of what used to work and explore what can work, what can be different. So
You're
thank
absolutely
you.
right.
Yes, thank you. How much is conflict avoidance really costing us in our business, in our relationships?
Yeah, I think
How do you
it's
measure
one.
that? Mhm,
It's a thing that where, sometimes it's this elusive thing, but there are often times where in business you can nail it down to, facts and figures of
mm,
what it may be costing your business. Where
mm,
I like to sort of anchor, right, in terms of a definition, how I think about it within my business.
mhm,
Conflict avoidance is really about the habit, right? And it's a behavior of dodging hard, honest conversations. And you're doing that either through silence, through over explaining, people pleasing, or even disappearing. And when it's done
mm,
at the expense of your own clarity, your own needs, your own self respect, that's where I like to be able to step in and say, wait a minute, there has to be a different way. So when you think about when women avoid conflict, they just don't lose peace, right? They're also quietly bleeding their revenue, their time,
mm,
their
mm,
respect, right?
mm,
Now, for some women, it may show up whether you're in the boardroom or you're in your own business based on how are you negotiating your raises? How are you thinking about your pricing, your contracts? Do you still have the same price point from when you first started your business, although you've invested in yourself, right? But that investment in yourself has not translated to an increased price point based on what you deliver for your clients, your
absolutely.
customers, your partners, right?
Mm, mhm,
The time that you spend sometimes when we're thinking about, oh, well, I don't want to seem disagreeable, but you find yourself spending time writing the same email 12 times, right? Rewriting it and rewriting it, or thinking about that conversation, you're replaying it in your head, you're waking up at 3 a.m. saying, I wish I just would have said this in the moment. And also when you find yourself avoiding key people or key meetings because there's something that's left unspoken, those
Mm,
are all small opportunities that are robbing you of the ability to elevate and uplift your ability to, number one, to be calmer. But when you think about the access to cash and connections and relationships, you
mhm,
have to be willing to lean into some of that. Where for me, it's the hardest, Santa, it's really about the self-respect,
mm,
right? And
mm,
that's the heaviest because every time you abandon yourself in a hard moment, you reinforce that someone else's comfort is more important than your own. And I think a lot of us are starting to understand that the best way for me to serve someone else is to be the best version of me first. So
mm.
I'm really for women prioritizing what do you need to then take care of others after?
Mhm, mhm. LaQuincia, you took me to a very early age.
Hmm.
I've been in the field for over 40 years now, and you took me to a place of when I started my business as a small private practice, part-time clinical
Hmm.
practice. I was not even able to say, here's how much you're going to pay me for my
Yeah,
work, for my sessions, for the fact that, I had to pay for my graduate degree. I had to invest in that. So I
absolutely.
would ask for donations. It was part-time. I was doing what I loved to do. It was my
Right,
gift to the
right.
community. Um, because I didn't quite, the bottom line is I didn't believe in myself. And
There
yeah,
you
right
go.
out of, graduate school, that's understandable. But also I didn't value the investment that I had
Hmm.
made in myself, right?
Yes,
So fast forward 45 years later, it's a whole different experience. But do we value what it is that we have to offer, right? Do we
right.
expect people to value us? So that's a very important conversation. It is about our self-value and how
It,
that hiding or avoiding conflict erodes
mhm.
that, erodes that. Yeah.
Because sometimes the conflict as well, to your point, right? And thank you for being so honest in
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
we are more times in conflict with ourselves, right? Because we
Mm,
don't want to seem greedy. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't
exactly.
want to, we like to be liked, right? We want to be in community with people. But
Mhm,
I've also learned that, as you continue to invest in yourself, you continue to uplift your skills, your ability to deliver for other people. I
mhm,
always say, right, and it's a very small example, but I think it relates. I recently turned on my Hulu streaming app, right?
mhm,
And they had a little alert that said price increase on your next statement. And guess what? I said okay, and I moved on, right? And it's because there's a value that's being delivered. And I think oftentimes we're so afraid, we're so scared to say, hey, this was the price that I was commanding at this point.
mhm,
Here's what I'm delivering and how I'm doing it now. Here is my new rate. And then being strong enough in your conviction to stay quiet and let the person respond.
yeah.
But even sometimes before they even respond, we're already rationalizing and giving them the
Mhm.
reasons
Giving them
why.
the out, right?
Yes, exactly. We've
Because
already
we
applied
need
a
an out
discount.
because we're
It,
feeling too uncomfortable.
exactly,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Hmm.
Yeah. So what changes, do we need to start making, and how do we begin to truly get comfortable with talking about value, worth, money, and calling it out?
Yeah.
What is your suggestion?
My
And not, ladies, and
suggestion,
not that we're not doing that, right? But
right,
how
right.
do we really master that?
How do you do it with I say with the consistent confidence that it requires, right?
Mhm.
Because sometimes we can show up in different moments in different arenas of our life and say, I can walk into this room and feel full and fully understand the value that I bring. But
Mhm.
I always say when you are no longer, right, the maybe the smartest or the brightest person in that room, when you put yourself in that next room, right, that's going to really challenge and stretch you, does your value, does your courage, does your confidence remain at that same level, or do you start to feel shaken a little bit? One way I always like to sort of equip people with Here's what I want you to do. If I'm not around, right? Number one, let's be honest and let's stop with some of the polite conversations.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
always someone that leans in. We can always find a way to be kind, right? When the
Hmm.
situation requires. Now, listen, if you're not safe, you're not safe, and you handle that situation appropriately. But I think when we stop having these conversations that quietly wreck our relations and revenue, is to really understand that politeness has, at this current time, has become code for I'm able to be unclear. I can be a little bit dishonest, and it's unsustainable. Kindness is different. If every conversation that you have ends with, it's fine, I'll just take care of it, that's not being true to yourself, right? That's not really being, that leads to resentment, that leads to you not showing up fully. So I ask women to shift just a little bit, right? Before you respond with it, it's fine. Walk yourself through these three sort of bullet points in your mind. What is actually happening in the conversation,
Hmm.
right? Let's make sure we're leaning on the facts. And let's also make sure that both people understand the facts in the situation, not the emotion. There's a place for that later.
That's right.
Then move into how is this impacting me or my work,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Once you can understand the impact and you can bring a little bit of vulnerability, that's where you have that emotion. That's where you're letting that other person know, hey, this may have hurt me a little bit, right? And sometimes we like to skip that step because for a lot of us, we were trained to not share that we're hurting, right? Or something didn't go the way we planned. So then once you can understand what that impact is, and then being very clear on, okay, here's what I need to do to change in that situation. If you can keep yourself anchored to those 3 points, it allows for you to move through those conversations with a lot more ease, a lot more grace, but you're fully prepared. And that's where the difference comes is the preparation in advance for those difficult conversations.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
sometimes you'll have someone who might want to catch you off guard, right? Because maybe they've taken one of my workshops already and they know they've already come with the plan. And I always say, there is nothing wrong with being able to say, you know what? I need a little bit of time to think about this.
Time.
I always recommend 48 hours, right? And then you come back and you have the conversation that builds trust, right? That keeps both people safe. And then both people get to have a conversation where we both are coming from a same place of understanding. It doesn't feel like this monologue, this attack, because
Mhm.
oftentimes we've let so much fester and build up in us that we're just reading down this laundry list of, well, you did this and you did this and you do this and you do this. Well, which one do you want the person to focus on, right? Start with one thing.
Yes. Not only that, but you bring to my mind the idea that it is not, I'm not avoiding when I say, let me get back to you. I'm actually saying this is an important decision.
Right.
You're asking me an important question. Let me think about it. Let me process it. Let me get back to you, right? So
Yeah.
there's no shame. That's
There's no
not saying
shame.
I can't respond, but I
Right.
want to honor and respect what you've asked me. What you're
Absolutely.
asking of me, right?
It's so important, I think, and it's
Mhm.
hard because we're in this world of a lot of instant information, instant responses, right?
Mhm.
But to
Mhm.
your point, if you want me to really treat the conversation with the care, the sensitivity, and with the context that it deserves, then that may take a little bit more time. Especially in a business situation, I may need to go take a look at my calendar, the previous work I was doing, so I can come back prepared to
That's
really
right.
discuss what's been going on, right? And if someone, I would say it's two-part, if someone is not willing to give you that time, to me, that feels like a situation that probably is unsafe. Maybe a bit
Mhm.
of, I don't like to use the term loosely, but we know that there is bullying that happens in the workplace and in partnerships and business at times. And as long as you are the person, if you require the 48 hours, your key responsibility is to make sure that when you say, hey, we're going to revisit this at this time,
You
you
do.
show up and you're prepared for the conversation. That's it.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And, people, we have different styles. So there will be, you said something about preparing, right? There will be
Mhm.
those conversation and those people who know that they can get more out of you if you're unprepared. right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
just to be prepared by knowing that, right? That's the preparation. You can go
There it
back
is.
and talk about it and think about it and look at your calendar, but be prepared to say, I need time.
And it's okay.
And that it is okay. Wow.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. So here's something else. Where do you see women losing themselves, losing their money? Like why what is that? Where does that come from? And you spoke a little bit about,
Yeah.
we're told that it's not polite, that it's not convenient, that it's not safe. But when you're a businesswoman who's been in business and you are avoiding, where is that coming from?
Yeah, it's that feeling when you know you're telling yourself what I'm being paid and what I'm delivering no longer match, right?
Mm, mm,
And that is to me across all sort of lines of business and industry.
mm, mm,
Oftentimes, especially us as women of color, we are making consistent effort to up level and elevate and improve the quality of work that we can
mm,
deliver because
mm,
sometimes we're already managing different narratives and stories in our
mm,
heads about
mm,
having to do twice as much or whatever the things you may have heard growing up, right? So for me, when you're locked into those old rates or when you're locked into a space of seeing it as being polite, you have to step away from that a little bit and understand you're running a business. And that's truly number
right.
one, right? Are you running a business? Are you running a passion project? Are you running a hobby? If we're really talking about you running a business, well, when I think about, when I first started to the earlier conversation, right? I had lower experience. Maybe I wasn't as confident in my skills. Well, a
Mhm,
lot of that
mhm,
has changed. But
mhm,
guess what? Some of us are still, Santa, are still giving those old friends and family discounts and not really speaking about all of the continued investment that we're making in ourselves. So when I say and I see women, every month that they delay increasing their pricing or
mhm,
having someone who is overrunning their scope. So now they're not devaluing themselves in pricing, but you're devaluing yourself because a job that maybe you were contracted for 40 or 60 hours, but you really given 80 hours because you wanted to make them feel good. That is where those all those small little things that you start doing that really reinforce to other people that they don't have to meet your expectations for yourself for you because you're not meeting and maintaining the expectations and standards you set on your own. You have to
that's right.
deliver and stand by your boundaries. I always say it is someone else's job to test your boundaries. It is then your job to enforce them.
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. And, I also think that there's something really significant when we're able to model that, right? With
Yes.
family and friends, the idea that, yeah, are you giving discounts? Are you just letting people take your service, right? Because
Mhm.
the other thing is that sometimes they're soft skills, right? And we know what we invested, right? But
Right.
people may or may not see that, right? So the idea that, particularly as women of color, that we're supposed to help the community, that we're
Mm.
supposed to want to give back. And you know what? Figure out how to do that outside of your business. That's what I
Absolutely.
say. Figure
Right.
charitable work is wonderful. Figure out how to do it outside of your business. Just speak to that. Like, what about the underdog? What about the person who's just starting? What about the people who need a little break? How do you manage that when you're
I
running
think
your
it,
business? Yeah.
yeah, it's multifaceted, right?
Mhm,
On one end, I always say, depending on where you are in the stage of building your own business, if you have an opportunity to maybe bring in a nonprofit arm, or maybe even just a pure
mhm,
philanthropic arm of your business to where you have funds set aside for clients who maybe aren't able to meet the price point in which you're delivering your work. One
mhm,
thing I will say is though, is if you never raise those prices, you'll never be able to build these things in, right? So now you're keeping your prices low and you're also offering services to people who maybe aren't your right fit client to
that's
really
right.
be able to grow and scale your business.
Mhm, mhm,
Also, it doesn't have to be direct in your business. Maybe you sponsor another smaller business or charity that's close to your heart, right? That as people move and grow through the stages, maybe that'll be something that aligns with them going forward. And then I always
mhm,
say, and it was something that I truly tried to practice when I was in corporate leadership, if I'm here, if my band level's the director or whatever that may be, then I'm going to go find a junior leader who is ambitious and curious and wants to learn. And maybe some of the work that I can't take on would be the right thing to
Okay.
pass down to that person as a stretch assignment,
Mhm. Sounds
right?
wonderful. Yeah, and also knowing what the capacity is, as a small business woman of color myself, leading a small business, I have a fixed number of what it is I can give.
Absolutely.
The way we
Yep.
do with any other charitable contribution, I have a fixed number. I do not work on a sliding scale. You're not going to tell me what you can pay me. I'm going to tell you what is overflow, what can I give away, and how much
Mhm.
and how often, right? So
Yeah,
that's really important. And then I have referrals, right? I can send you somewhere else where there's quality work. I may
absolutely.
not
Absolutely.
have to serve everybody, right?
And it's okay not to serve everybody,
Yeah,
right? Because
yeah,
then how does that serving everyone doesn't really sharpen your skill set, right? Because you want to be true about that thing where you are really able to ignite change and
mhm, mhm.
transformation within your clients. And I think also sometimes when you talk about that sliding scale, there are many women I speak to in business where their conflict is they don't even understand what it costs to run their business,
Ah,
right? So if you are blind or avoiding your own numbers and really having to be honest about the status of your business, is it profitable? Is it not? And then really make new choices based on that. Sometimes that outcome could be maybe this is not the right business model for you. Maybe you
okay.
need to think about a different way to use your skill set,
Mhm,
right? Oftentimes it's easier to continue to spin
mhm.
rather than disrupt that and say, let me do something different.
That's right. That's right. So, I think that unfortunately, a lot of small businesses are being ran with fear, right? So
Yeah.
being able to step in, to be
Hmm.
bold, to say, you know what? I am worth it. My business is worth it. And the people I'm working with have the right to receive, in this case, a consultant, a clinician that is not holding back, right? That's not
Right.
having hidden agendas because they're not feeling fulfilled or satisfied in the interaction, in the contract, right? The
Hmm.
contract is clear. I'm here to serve you, to offer you a service, and you're there to receive exactly what I am ready to offer. Nothing
Absolutely.
less because you are paying less, nothing less because I'm frustrated with your growth and not
Hmm.
it's business, right?
That is it.
So for the women who are out there in our audience here at the symposium who are wondering, where do I begin?
Yeah.
I need to increase my price point. I know that much. I want to be able to value myself. I know that much, but where do I begin? What is just one or two words of wisdom or phrases to remember? Mantrams, I say,
Hmm.
that I'm going to repeat to myself on my way to that meeting. Just one or two.
Absolutely. I say, before you start having that conversation externally with anyone else, start with yourself
Mhm,
and really being able to ask yourself and answer honestly, what does it actually cost me in time, money, and energy to deliver the thing that you need to deliver?
mhm,
Understanding that first will then allow you to go from a place of knowingness and understanding, and then it will allow you to make more informed and aligned decisions as you go forward.
mhm.
The second,
Absolutely.
the second key I would probably share is what price would feel honest and sustainable for the woman I am now and not the woman I was when I set this rate,
That's
right?
key, right? That is key. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We
And it's
deserve, yeah, we deserve our worth.
You do, and being able to do it courageously and boldly, it takes practice. For a lot of us, we're stepping into a completely different energy, a level of access, than maybe the people and the circles and the families that we come from. So you may not be able to turn to the people around you immediately and say, "Hey, how do I do this? I want to increase the prices for my business."
Mhm,
They may not know, or they may have so much love and care and support for you. They don't understand that same level of risk. They want to keep you safe. right? So you
Mhm.
have to be around people who are going to stretch you, the people who are commanding those prices and getting paid those prices,
Mhm.
right? It's about making sure you are moving into the next right fit room to grow yourself and doing it out of truth, not out of apology, limiting how much you're coming from that scarcity mindset that a lot of us
Mhm.
understood
Mhm.
and were sort of raised through. And I
Mhm.
think, before you can say it out loud in a room in front of someone else, I say practice in the mirror.
That's right.
Record in maybe your own voice on your phone, have a voice note saying, my name is LaQuincia Nichols. I'm a conflict and communication strategist, and the price I charge for a 3-hour session is X amount of dollars. And
That's
you
right.
pause and you leave it there.
That's right. And you leave
And
it there. You give space for the silence,
give them space for the
right?
silence.
And in the meantime, you may be taking some breaths.
Yes.
You may be whatever it is you need to do, jotting
I
down
always
some
say it's
notes
the
for
duck
yourself.
underwater, right? The duck, when you see it, it's perfect above the water, but under, we're doing some of this, right?
And
And
that's fine. And that's
that's fine.
absolutely. Wow.
Yes,
Wow.
yes,
LaQuinzia, I cannot, Queen LaQuinzia Nichols, Q. I cannot thank you enough for your wisdom. And so just tell us, how can people reach you if we want more of you, more encouragement, more, just fierce, be honest, be true to
absolutely.
yourself. How do
Yes, yes.
people
So
reach you?
I am around on all social media. So when you think Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at my name, LaQuincia Nichols, or at my business website is experience-coaching.com. That's a hyphen for those in academia, right? So people who know a hyphen versus a dash. And I would say, I'm always happy to have a quick 15-minute chat with anyone who thinks they're in conflict and they're looking to get a
Mhm.
little clarity.
Mhm.
On my website, there's a 15-minute call, absolutely free for anyone who's taking a listen here.
Yes, and audience, again, thank you for being here, for giving yourself this time. LaQuincia Nichols has also gifted those participants of the 2026 Women of Color Leaders Symposium with what she calls Spark Conversation Igniter. So you'll get the resource so that you can, just give yourself some time, give yourself
Mhm.
that space, let yourself have at least a conversation. So again, LaQuinzia, I thank you for your time, for
Pleasure.
your presence, and for your offering.
Thank you so
Yes,
much for having me.
absolutely. So folks out there, ladies, just, continue to take some deep breaths and continue to make time for the rest of this 2026 Women of Color Leaders Symposium. It's my gift to you. Hang in there. Thank you again, LaQuincia.
My pleasure.